Okay, and we're gonna launch this bad boy. This is great.
Okay.
Give me just a moment. I'm gonna play the intro first. Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, your destination to hear stories of how businesses grow and scale. I'm Robert Brill, CEO of BrillMedia.co and the host of this podcast. Now, let's jump right into this week's interview. Michelle Diamond, thanks for being with us today. Holy cow, we are live. You are the first guest on the new live streaming feature that we have going for the LA Business Podcast. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction before we start. Our guest today is Michelle Diamond, CEO of Elevate Diamond Strategy, a growth strategy development and execution advisory and interim executive firm. Specializes in new market entry, go-to-market, competitive intelligence, business expansion, and operational improvement, organic and M&A. So that's a lot. You have
Yeah.
a lot of like. I'm not surprised to find out. I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile here. I'm not surprised to see that you have experience. You've worked at Accenture, Ernst and Young. Tell us a little bit about your background. You have an MBA from Duke, Wharton School. Holy cow! So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got to this position where you have your business.
Okay, yeah, I'll actually start backwards forwards because it makes more sense. If you start forwards backwards, it might be confusing.
Okay.
So I started my career off in accounting and finance. So I actually am a CPA. I worked for some large companies. I worked for Colgate-Palmolive and Citibank and some other banks and some other organizations. I even worked for immigration for a little while. And then afterwards, I went over to Ernst& Young, excuse me, where I got my CPA. I did public accounting, which is audit work for a lot of different companies there. And then I also went into mergers and acquisitions while I was at Ernst& Young. So I had a great time there. A lot of people hated it, but I actually loved being an auditor, believe it or not, even though that my personality is a little more boisterous, let's just say, than most
You're
auditors.
looking at numbers all
But
day.
well,
You're looking
well,
at
you know what?
numbers.
See, accounting is different than auditing. People don't really understand the distinction unless you're in
I
it.
don't.
Auditing is different in the sense that you are looking at numbers and digging into processes, but you're also dealing with a lot of clients. So you get to learn a lot about a lot of different industries and companies and everything in business, regardless of what you're doing. Any real business person knows that more than 50% of your job is dealing with people. So while on the one hand, it's the actual tactical work, you're still dealing with people to get things done and to understand their businesses so that you can do your job. And in that case, it was auditing to make sure they were in compliance on a process standpoint as well as a numbers one. And so I kind of, I was promoted in kind, not officially, but in kind very quickly. And I got to a place where I loved seeing the results and understanding statements and financials and how companies work, but I wanted to be a part of making those numbers happen. And so since I love the client piece and love the learnings that came along with a broad breadth of companies and industries, I transitioned over into strategic consulting. I actually didn't know what it was at first. I actually
What's
never even
strategic
heard of it.
consulting?
Yeah, I really didn't have a clue. Fortunately, I had a wonderful friend who worked with me at Ernst Young at the time, and he saw me stressed out when I was trying to figure out what to do. He recommended strategic consulting. I looked into it, and I realized to get into a top firm, I had to get my MBA. So I literally went, I was very green at the time because I was the only person in my family who ever went to graduate from college, let alone get a master's. So I just kind of guided whatever was the best and what I needed to solve now my new goal, really. And so I applied to several business schools. I fortunately got into a couple and I chose Duke. And then I focused on the other side of what I didn't know, which was the marketing and market entry kind of business expansion work. Because I figured I could match that with the operational and financial piece that I already had. And so while I was at Accenture, I focused a lot on a lot of high growth SaaS startups. I was helping them one grow from 2 to 20 million in 2 years, another one from 10 million. Well, their goal was 10 million to 100 million in 2 years. They made 10 million to 40 million in 2 years. They didn't quite meet their goal, but they went public and there were a lot of other things. But I learned from that experience, about how to enter a market, about the competitive landscape, about how to truly grow a company. And what also helped me when I worked there is that I still married my background. So a lot of people grow companies from the top line. They say, ooh, look at this big market, or ooh, look at this great opportunity, and they don't see how to make it profitable. And so I worked on helping companies to actually make it profitable by marrying the growing the top line piece with having the operational and finance piece there. So after Accenture, I actually went ahead and I took a role at Cigna where I oversaw one of their in-house businesses. It was a $20 million manufacturing company. So I got a chance to oversee a manufacturing company, a printing business. Cigna does insurance, but they did have a printing business at that time. And my role was to oversee that business, really to be carte blanche in terms of, what I should do with the business, in terms of whether we should grow it and invest or divest it. And I ended up streamlining the business to prepare for future growth, spun off some product lines, and got it to a place of profitability. And then after that, I went to Cigna's, one of their divisions, where I built up their competitive intelligence function. That was a job I created because I believe if you ask very simple questions from someone who should know the simple answer and they cannot answer it, there's a problem or an opportunity. And at the time, Cigna was looking to shift downstream to a different marketplace and only looked at it from a profitability standpoint and not necessarily from a competitive landscape standpoint. So I made that my job after a lot of negotiating and buy-in. And then fortunately for me, it was an unrealized need, and the demand drove my role to then become expanding an entire department where I brought in staff, created alliances, and then leveraged that up to help them add a significant amount to their top line when I was there. And then after that, I realized I wanted to get back into consulting work, the type of growth strategy work that I love. But I didn't want to live out of a suitcase, and my personal life at the time didn't warrant me, traveling all over the place. And all the other big companies, they pretty much, that was at least at the time, part of what you had to do. And so I had a clear vision. I knew what I had to offer was valuable. And honestly, in my mind, I figured I would just make the leap. I figured if it didn't work out, I would just not do it. And fortunately for me, January will be 16 years I've been doing this now on my own. And so the development piece for the growth strategies is exactly that. When companies don't have it, or they need to refresh or enhance or update what they have. And the execution piece is because, again, I look at companies in a holistic way to make sure that whatever is developed or enhanced or optimized is actually something that's going to give them the bottom line growth that they actually are looking for, but in a way that's going to help them move forward and get to that next level.
Can you talk about some of the practical elements? Because like I understand the theoretical elements of
Mm-hmm,
what you discussed, but in
mm-hmm,
practice, I don't know what that a lot of that stuff means. Like for example, you mentioned
mm-hmm.
using operations and finance or operational excellence in finance to grow a company, a startup from 2 million to 20 million, let's say.
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
that? What is that? Give us examples of what that actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, so I'll give that. Actually go into a little bit of detail on that particular client all those years ago. So again, high growth for them at $2 million, which is obviously not a lot, but they were bootstrapping, which most companies do. When you're first starting out, and bootstrapping just means we get a sale here, we get a sale there. We know this person. We're able to kind of, just add sales and start growing our business. But when you truly are trying to get to the next level, and you're actually trying to grow your business in an exponential way, bootstrapping and getting sales here and there doesn't really work. I mean, you can kill yourself trying to make it happen, maybe, but it's not really the best way to do it. Plus, they were also trying to raise money, and they were trying to do a lot of other things. And so, they really didn't have a full strategy. They didn't have a plan. And so with them, step one is, okay, we have this cool software, and their particular software is one that could actually serve multiple markets, which a lot of software, especially the ones that are truly specialized, a lot of SaaS companies have that same thing. So if we can serve, a whole bunch of markets, and in this case, we got it down to like 10 markets. They said, okay, these are the best markets that you should probably enter based on, the market size, the opportunity, the competitive landscape. Like, it's almost like you get a big picture of everything, and then you look to say, well, where are the gaps? Where are the customer needs, or again, the unrealized needs, which just means that a customer doesn't know what their needs are, but you are introducing something new to actually help them meet it, and they just don't know how to articulate it yet. And then you go from there and you say, okay, and now this is who we are, and this is our capabilities. So, where do our capabilities best fit with the other piece of the puzzle, which is the opportunity, and how can we best leverage our resources now to enter these markets? And so you can't enter all 10 at one time. At least this company couldn't. They're only $2 million even with funding. And most companies can't. Even if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you typically are not going to put everything. You still have limited resources. You have budgets. You have things. So company size doesn't matter. What?
Yeah, bureaucracy.
No, I didn't hear what you said. Right. So you have that stuff too, but the point is you still have limited resources regardless. So it was really a matter of, okay, so let's rank and prioritize. And there's tools and there's ways of doing that strategically as well. I set up what's called like evaluative criteria based on the company. I usually tailor it and say, okay, let's rank and prioritize in a systematic way which markets you should enter. So they came up with one, ranked and prioritized the top 10. And then they said, okay, great. Now you told us these great markets we can enter. How do we do it? Right? So that's the market entry piece. So then the second step is, all right, let's take market one, which is what I worked with them to do. When I took market one, in this particular company, the first market was actually pharmaceutical distribution because their software actually was helping to link, let's just say, the middleman more to the middleman more to the end user, whereas they really didn't have much of a relationship because they didn't have much of a brand. So in pharmaceutical distribution, that might be a McKesson or a Cardinal Health, and those are companies that distribute to, let's say, these smaller pharmacies, but the large company sometimes has a relationship with a smaller pharmacy, sometimes they don't. Okay. And the small pharmacies could easily switch back and forth. So there's no loyalty, right? So the software was trying to help with that. So there's a lot of markets that are set up in that way. And so what I did for them is said, all right, now we have this market. It's the same thing at the top level, but now we're taking it down to a more definitive level, because now we know the exact markets we want to go ahead and enter. And so what I did then is go and say, all right, let's look at these potential customers. Now that we know the market and we know what we're offering in our value proposition, let's look to say which customer segments have the greatest needs. And so it's about identifying all of these companies, doing assessments with them to see if they had the software in place, if they weren't being competitive and maybe they were losing share, certain things that you look for to say, all right, this is what we're going to go now diagnose and say these particular companies have the greatest needs. Now, what I also did with this particular company is say, well, look, you may have large multinational companies and then you have small to mid-sized businesses. They have different needs in different ways, even if they quote unquote have the same one. You can't offer the same thing. So I had to help them now productize what they had in terms of their software, because they were excellent in terms of understanding code and how to come up with these great features, but they didn't understand how to take that and now productize it in such a way that you actually can go to the market with something that your potential customers can understand, because not everybody's going to understand that level of detail, and that you have a business case for it. So I broke down for them what I call the Rolex and the Timex strategy. And I said, okay, for your Rolex level clients, which was typically the large multinationals, your Fortune 1000, your Global 100 clients, the way that they typically purchase services is in this particular way. So you need to gear your software to answering their questions, satisfying their needs, but then doing it in such a way that it's going to be easy for them to purchase and to integrate. And it's something that you can actually sell more of too, because they obviously have more and they're larger and they have, a bigger landscape in terms of who they serve. And then the smaller companies, I said, well, a lot of them may not be able to afford your services, or they may not even need to take it on in terms of the whole suite and all the features and the way that your software is currently set up. So let's come up with a Timex strategy. And that's really more like, okay, these are the people that can afford a Timex versus a Rolex. There's still some, potential customers that can make you profitable, but now you have to, again, speak to them in their language and focus on providing products and services in a way that they'll be able to understand. And so then from there, because it's a startup, and with startups, you have to do everything, which is not a bad thing. I help them with, it's not just developing the product. I help them write marketing messaging. I worked with their sales team. I wrote the sales scripts. I even show them how to calculate, what a company could save or what a company could potentially earn, really got them down to that level. And even created like a how-to manual, because the CEO at the time said he wants me to train everyone on this. So I literally helped them successfully enter the first 2 markets. And then after that, I trained their management team on how to actually enter the other 8, so that they knew, not only what I developed, but that they knew that they could just literally take it and run and actually start going out there and driving the business development and achieving the sales. And while a lot of companies that I work with don't necessarily have me do all those different steps, with the smaller one, it was great because it enabled me to obviously leverage a lot of what I have to offer and have the companies thinking a bit differently, and then enable them to learn something that's going to help them to grow. So they actually ended up being very successful. They got acquired, which was fine for them because, when you get funding, one of the big things you want to do is get acquired or exit by going public or some other way. But, it was a great opportunity for me as well because it allows me to use a lot of my background to be able to help the company now, again, on this top line piece. But in the evaluative criteria piece, one of the criteria was, okay, is this particular market going to be profitable? If you go and enter in, and let's say there's already people who are dominating the market, and it's going to cost you a ton of money to try to fight these people which you don't have. Well, maybe that's not the best market, even if it is a $10 billion market. I mean, you can't just look at size. So being able to have these different nuances in and pull from the strategic side as well as the operational and the finance side. And because, another criteria too was capability. If you got $100 million contract today, could you handle it? The answer for them would have been no.
Right.
So it's not that you don't go for the $100 million contract, but you have to build up your capabilities, whether you do it, yourself, or you outsource, or you leverage, whatever it is. Like, you have to be prepared for the opportunity before the opportunity comes, because then you'll lose it. And then you have to spend a long time scrambling to get back up to that same place. So it's like a balancing act, and it's almost like a puzzle, so to speak. But when you solve it, and again, I try to do it tailored for companies, it's something that's extremely beneficial. And that's how you really do, at least I find, a proper growth strategy. Like, growth strategy is a sexy word that people have heard all the time. Some people understand it, some people don't. But, even though I've been trained at larger consulting firms as well, for me, my goal is making sure that it's executable, it's implementable, it's still innovative, but it's also done in a way that's very simple and easy for those on the recipient end to understand. Like, my job to me is not to impress people with a pretty deck and then they're like, oh, that's like so amazing. And then it goes nowhere, and I've even been brought in for certain companies where they've done that with other, let's just say, traditional consulting firms, and they've gotten some value. But then when it came to actually implementing or executing, whether on a corporate level or a divisional level, like, it just sat there because it didn't really match, what was needed to actually make it follow through. So that's
So
kind of an example of all of that. Yeah.
yeah, so let's hone in on that Rolex versus Timex. I really like that, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you
Yeah.
why that's relevant to our business, and I think probably a lot of businesses. We are we have currently our business, it has the Rolex. We have the Rolex clients.
Hmm.
We're working to attract the Timex clients.
Hmm.
And it's a very different type of business and different
Hmm.
models, different processes. Can you talk about some of the intricacies and differences of attracting the Rolex clients and some of the Timex clients?
Yeah, I would say that because that wasn't the only company that I was able to do that for, even though that's the way I described it with them. With the Rolex clients, I mean, your proposition is, one, you have to show that you have the acumen, that you can serve them at their level. You understand their needs. You're positioning for a high end, and so you're speaking their language in everything. Everything's high end. Everything is, you know. Track record of results. These are things that are important to them, but it's really more about the kind of prestige angle, and making sure that everything you do is focused on, how they can be more innovative, how they can keep on getting to the next level, things of that nature. The Timex clients, they care about the same things. They obviously want to grow as well. They want to get to the next level as well. They want to be aspirational as well. I mean, most people in business want that regardless of your size. But with the Timex clients, you have to do it in a way that's a little bit more practical sometimes. Like, you have to kind of, again, speak to them in some of the things that their challenges are and what they need. Someone who, let's say, is running a small to mid-sized business, has the challenges a lot of times of doing more. Sometimes, again, it's all companies are different, but collectively, they may be trying to run the business at the same time they going out there and they're trying to be the face of the business. Sometimes they're just out there promoting. Sometimes they're doing business development. They're doing a lot of these things, and yes, have people in place that may do the day to day, but they're a lot more hands on. With their company, with their staff. They care about. Well, a lot of times the personal just might be a bit, stronger or closer, just because of the nature of the size of the business, especially if the founder or the person who's in charge was responsible for helping to build the business from scratch. You may have that the dynamics of what they're dealing with is a little bit more localized, or their work-life balance, even though everyone has work-life balance, it's a little bit more as well. And so, being able to, just to be able to meet their needs and speak in their language, and I think talk more about how much you care in your delivery of your products and services is something that's going to resonate more with the smaller clients. While the larger clients may like it, at the end of the day, they usually have a reporting structure. And even if you're the CEO, you're still reporting to the board. So you still have a difference, I think, in terms of how much you need to personalize and customize, at least on that emotional connection level. Whereas they care more about just the results. Whereas the other side, again, you just have to relate more to what they're going through, as well as delivering, whatever the product or services that you're delivering.
Awesome. Michelle, let me ask you a question. Can you hear me okay? Because I was having a little bit of trouble hearing you just for a few moments there.
Oh, no, I can hear you fine. Oh, you didn't hear what I just said?
Can restate a little bit of that, the last like minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Okay. Now, I was just saying that while it's important when you're dealing with a Rolex client or a Timex client to meet their needs, it's also important to communicate with them in a way that is going to resonate with them more. So the larger clients, they are record of results. They care about, making sure that you can actually serve them, that you're at that level. Things have to be high end and put together and high class, and obviously help them to get to the next level, but in a way that's very clear and concise and oftentimes to the point. Whereas the Timex clients, they care about results as well, but it's being a personal connection and making sure that you're talking more about meeting their emotional and their personal needs along with whatever the product or service is that you're doing tends to resonate a little bit more, just because the people who are running those small to mid-sized companies, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes are the ones who built it from scratch. So they have more of a vested interest in their employees. They have more vested interest in the relationships with them. They're usually closer, as well as with vendors or customers and things of that nature. So you just have to do, even though mass customization and personalization is something that's going on in our world as a whole, even without recent developments, it's really about connecting with them on both levels, as well as understanding how to serve them. So like not selling them too much, not pushing for something only a large company would take, and then speaking in their language. So that's usually the differentiator between the two. Like, again, the base stuff, obviously you still have to deliver a great product and service. You still have to give the value proposition. You still have to show them how they're going to grow, how they're going to be profitable, all of that. But I think the nuances is usually that, that more that emotional, personalized side versus the large companies that really don't care as much as you can just say, okay, these are the results I can help you achieve.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned throughout the years, when we were starting our business, my experience with advertising had been with Fortune 500 brands and large
Mm-hmm.
companies. So I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
so the brand that I know 100% is Fortune 500 was ConocoPhillips. I worked on their advertising for a few
Okay.
years. But like
Mm-hmm.
other brands, like Party, Toshiba, PetSmart, whatever the case is. So I went into the marketplace. I was like, hey, I do programmatic advertising. I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you, I mean, you might know what that is, but the reality
Mm-hmm.
of it is most business owners that I was trying to sell did not know what programmatic advertising actually was. And I was
Mm-hmm.
totally talking over people, and it's hard to sell when you talk in jargon and in terms that people just don't understand. So it's like
Yeah.
talking no one, the confused mind doesn't buy. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's fascinating. I took some notes here. I'm gonna revisit what you said about the Rolex and Timex for our
Mm-hmm.
own business, because we're rolling out an independent business marketing solution, which is definitely the Timex. It's less expensive, no
Mm-hmm.
luggage, but it gets the job done, sales and leads, etc. So it's a fascinating idea there, Rolex versus Timex. Can you
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your business right now?
Yeah. With my business, I've had to shift a little bit this year. I started off the year, again, I do a hybrid, as you mentioned in the introduction, and some people may not understand this. I'll clarify a little bit, in a sense that rather advisory basis, a consulting basis, or interim executive. And interim executive just simply means is that I'd go into a company and take on a role for a few months, sometimes someone may have went on maternity leave, or maybe a company wants to take more time before they hire somebody full time, or sometimes it's leading an initiative like an integration after an acquisition or something like that. So I've done both of those things. And this year, I actually was on the cusp of getting one of the biggest contracts I've actually ever gotten in all my years, which was an interim executive role. It was going to be a 6-month role, and I would have had to move to another state. But I was looking forward to it. And then COVID hit. And so that all went away. So that was pretty tough. But what it's made me do is shift more, honestly, to the advisory piece. Over the years, I've probably done more on the consulting, full-blown consulting. So that maybe someone hires me to develop a strategy, or improve their profits or fix their processes, and it's a set time. So it could be several months or several weeks, and we have a scope, and I have a beginning and an end. Whereas now I'm focusing more on advisory, even though I'm open to those other traditional roles, because companies need more flexibility. And advisory, it can be as simple as someone puts me on retainer, or they want me to retain me for several hours at a time. They have business questions. They want somebody to bounce stuff off of, someone who's unbiased and obviously, is going to keep their privacy intact. My life is NDAs. I have no problem with signing anything. Or they have initiatives, or maybe it is, can you just review our strategy right now? We know we need to update it. Or can we review our organizational structure? People come with all types of questions. Or again, it might be more extensive. If I'm doing a review, I'll review it and obviously come back with notes and recommendations, things like that. Or again, it may be one-offs. But I had to become more flexible because, again, other business owners and leaders had to become more flexible as well. And right now, it enables me to be able to serve them at their point of need. And that's something I appreciate because, again, I've been very fortunate to work with so many companies and so many different growth stages and so many different issues that it's very easy for me to get up to speed on a new company very quickly and really understand what the core needs or the core questions are, and of course what needs to be answered. So that's been a shift in my practice this year.
Michelle, when you think about growth and all of your experiences with growing a company, what are some of the tactical things that you've done in the past that our listeners can take advantage of? Marketing, growth,
Mhm.
what's your go-to there, and what do you rely on, or does it change per type of client you work on? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean the core approach doesn't really change. The nuances change to fit an industry or company size or their goals. I would say the first thing is to, and some of these are going to be very basic, but it's just the truth. The first thing is you want to have a goal in place. You want to know, where you want to grow from. If it's top line, if you're in a contracting mode, it may be bottom line in terms of keeping your profitability up. But it's nice to have a goal. I mean, there are some companies and some initiatives that sometimes your goal may just be to see what the potential might be, and that's fine too. But most of the time, it's easy to have a goal. The other part is you have to look at basic things in terms of the market, whatever market that you're in. And that can be in terms of the industry, if you're thinking about verticals, or it can be just in terms of your geographic location. Whether you're a pizza shop or, you're a multinational corporation, you still have to look to see like what market are you in. And you have to understand what the size of the market is. You need to know whether or not it's growing, whether or not it's contracting. That's something, again, can be done on a high level or a low level, but you have to understand where the trends are, because there are many industries and there's many markets that are shrinking right now. And some historically, like I remember working for a printing client, and they were not a chemical company that worked in terms of pulp and paper, right? Because they had chemicals to produce paper. Well, guess what? The world's been going digital for so many years. They were number one for like almost 100 years, and now the world has shifted. So if they didn't pay attention to what's going on in the market, then guess what? Then they do exactly what happened to them, which is they got up and all of a sudden they're losing money. Again, that's a very big example, but if you're in a neighborhood where people are moving away, I mean, all of these things you have to know. The second piece is the competitive landscape. And many companies do not have a clue. Again, it does not matter what size. I get retained by Fortune 100 companies that don't know who their competitors are. They don't know who their competitors are. If they do, you have no clue what they're doing. And it's the same sort of thing. You're rather missing out because you're not leveraging a competitive advantage. Let's say you're better than your competitors. You can have a better product, a better service, a better everything. But if you don't know how you stack up, you can't leverage it. You're just kind of going along. So you're losing out. On the other end, If you're not being competitive, that's also something a lot of times companies find out too late. All of a sudden, you're losing customers, you're losing share, you don't know what's going on. Oh, well, guess what? Your competitors are doing something faster, better, cheaper. I mean, that's really usually the three prongs if you want to make it as simple as possible in terms of a product or service that they're offering. So if they're doing that faster, better, cheaper, and now they're starting to gain traction, you don't want to be in defense mode where you're putting out fires and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing came up. I didn't even know it was there. Not all companies have the resources to have a dedicated, competitive intelligence or analysis function, but it should still be something that you're doing on a periodic basis. Now, whether with your own employees or you hire someone like myself or someone else who does it, the important thing is that you have a gauge on what's going on outside of what you're doing. And again, that helps for small companies where you're so busy running the company, or even large companies where they're very internally focused and they don't know a lot of times either. And that's existing competitors as well as emerging ones that may just be more technologically advanced or just doing things in a way that's just better. The
So
other, go ahead.
Go ahead. I want to ask you about your book. Talk to the third point.
Okay, so I'll tie the third point into the book then. So the third point is to know your customers. And again, that sounds very simple, but not many people know their customers at all. Some companies do customer surveys, which is great. Some don't, which is horrible. But then even for the ones that do them, they often do nothing with them. They just say they do the survey. They maybe do the metrics in terms of what went up or down if they've done several, and they don't make them actionable. Like I actually created something at an old company of mine, and I named it the Customer Satisfaction Action Project, right? So that's all fancy. And all that really meant is we're going to actually take the customer satisfaction work that we retain these big market research firms to do, or we've done ourselves, and we're actually going to take action on what the customers have asked us for. And we're going to communicate that we're taking this action because so customers feel like when they give their feedback, it's actually going to be something that's going to be actionable. Okay, things like it's difficult, but it's not. The other thing is that it gives you a gauge on where you stand. You can't assume that your customers are happy or unhappy, guilty, and things like that. But again, things change very quickly. And in terms of my book, How to Grow and Expand Your Business in Times of Feast or Famine, which I'm very happy, Robert, that you are communicating now. My book was developed because I started presenting to a lot of small and mid-sized business owners who honestly did not understand growth and didn't know.
Oh, Michelle, I'm losing you.
And a lot of them honestly couldn't
Michelle,
afford
can you say
me.
that again?
So
I
I
lost you there
decided to
for a moment.
actually develop. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that a lot of these small to mid-sized business owners and companies could not afford my consulting services. So I wrote the book based on presentations that, in terms of really breaking down what is growth strategy, how can you use it for your business. I put it in 10 simple steps, and I gave a lot of examples of companies of different sizes, and I tried to make it as easy as possible. But it's really a roadmap and a guide that companies can literally go in and you can read each chapter. And some of these things I'm talking about how to look at the competitive landscape and knowing your competitors or figuring out who they are and who your customers are and how to size your market or figure out what market you're in, how to look at your capabilities and how to see if you have the right resources in place and whether or not you're profitable. All of these things that I'm talking about, I made in a way that's very practical and again simple and easy to understand. I use that a lot because that's really my goal in life, not just in business, in life, to make things as easy as possible. And it's been great. And why it's about in feast or famine is that at the end of the day, regardless of what's going on in the external environment right now, COVID is hitting us hard, but this is not the first, business challenge we've had. It may be, heightened because of the nature of this pandemic, but we've had recessions before, we've had ups and downs. The SBA has a statistic that only 1/3 of businesses make it past 10 years. And I believe the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that only 50% make it past 5 years. So that means is that the world goes up and down. These are the same statistics. So it has nothing to do with what's going on externally. And I'm a person that believes in fundamentals. Like fundamentals is so key for me. And what my book really focuses on is the fundamentals of business. Because once you have these fundamentals in place and you shore them up and then you do them on a continuous basis, whether you do it yourself or you hire someone to help you do it and help train you on it and communicate on it, your business is not going to stand. All hard times show is that you'd rather have a strong foundation that's going to help you weather through the storm and continue to thrive when a storm is over or even thrive during the storm, or that you didn't have a strong foundation to begin with, and now you're seeing everything blow up because this right now, again, is COVID, but there'll be other challenges. And so my book will really take you through a step-by-step way in how to do it. I've been very fortunate. I got a lot of great feedback for it. And like I said, it was from presentations that I gave. So I made sure to include a lot of the feedback from people who are truly, running their businesses, dealing with these challenges every single day. And it's a way that I believe that you'll be able to not only be educated on why these large companies pay so much for consultants like myself to come in and do growth strategy, but why it doesn't have to be some really big thing that you think you can't apply to your business, because it'll set you apart, and it'll definitely, if you're not in the place where you need to be, it'll get you back on the right track so that you can continue on the path to that growth and profitability and getting to that next level, regardless of what's going on around you outside of you.
Where can people, in the last few minutes here, where can people buy the book?
You can actually buy it on my site. So if you go to elevatediamondstrategy.com, you can do /book. It's there. If you go to the site itself, it's on the first page. I believe there's some links on my homepage as well, but it's a dedicated page to going through some of these things that I mentioned. You can buy it in the hard copy version or the e-version, which most people do now because most things are e-version at this time because of the nature of what we're going through. But it is, again, it's a simple read, but it's not meant to just be a book that you can just read and put down. It's really meant to be a workable book for yourself and your employees, if you choose to buy for them, to really take you through each of the steps. And even at the end of each chapter, I have the common pitfalls to avoid, and things that you should be doing, so that you also have kind of earmarkers or markers to kind of help you with making sure you do the right stuff, and then also helping to make sure that you don't do the wrong things.
That's right. Awesome. Should people, if people want to reach out to you, Michelle, is it through the website, or what's the best way to do this?
Yes, you can absolutely go to the website and to the contact us page. I also have contact us on probably each page that's on my site. You can reach me at my email address, which is michelle@elevatediamondstrategy.com, and it's Michelle with 2 L's because people spell it differently. You can also just call at 310-595-4273. That's the business line. Again, 310-595-4273. Any of those mediums will be fine to reach out to me. I am usually try to get back to people relatively quickly, definitely within 24 hours, if not earlier. And again, I'm happy to help any business that needs help to, again, get to the next level, answer those questions, whether growing, because business growing also has challenges with scaling and keeping that up from a bottom line perspective, or you're not, and you're just really looking for somebody to help you to get there. And like I mentioned earlier, or if you just have a lot of business questions and you need somebody who you can bounce off until you get to that place where you can take on things a little bit more, a little bit bigger in terms of a project basis or a role basis. I'm here to help. It's definitely my passion. I really want to help companies as much as I can. And I look forward to speaking to whoever decides to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle Diamond, everyone. Michelle Diamond is the CEO of Elevate Diamond Strategy, a growth strategy development firm. Thanks for being with us today.
All right. Thank you.